Captain Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal wall of the ship's viewing window. Through the thick glass, he could see a small blue dot in the endless black of space. His heart beat faster as he watched it grow bigger with each passing hour. After 500,000 years, humanity was finally going home. The blue dot was Earth, their Earth, the world that had been taken from them so long ago that the story felt like a myth told around campfires. But Jake knew it was real. Every human alive carried the memory in their blood, passed down through thousands of generations who had never seen their true home. Jake was 43 years old, born on a cold mining station between two dead stars. His great-grandmother had been born on a different station, orbiting a different sun. His great-great-grandmother had been born on yet another world, far from here. None of them had ever breathed real air or felt real sunlight on their skin, but they all knew the stories. They all knew what had been stolen from them. Captain Morrison to the bridge, came the voice through the ship's speakers. Jake took one last look at Earth, then walked through the narrow corridors of the UNS Defiance. The ship was huge, bigger than most cities back in the colonies. But it felt small when Jake thought about the long journey that had brought them here. The bridge was a circular room filled with screens and blinking lights. Men and women sat at control stations, their fingers moving quickly over keyboards. Touch screens. Some of them had wires plugged into their heads, connecting their brains directly to the ship's computers. This was normal now. Humans had changed a lot during their long exile. Report, Jake said as he walked to the center of the bridge. Lieutenant Amy Parker turned in her chair to face him. Half of her face was covered in metal, with a glowing blue light where her left eye should be. The metal parts were connected to her brain, making her think faster than any normal human could. We're getting clear readings now, Captain. The enemy has been busy. Jake looked at the main screen. It showed Earth, but not the Earth from the old stories. This Earth was covered in silver cities and metal rings. Huge space stations floated around it like metal moons. Where Earth's real moon had been, there was now a massive fortress made of dark metal and glowing energy shields. How many ships? Jake asked. Commander Rick Davis answered from his station on the left side of the bridge. Rick was tall and thin, with pale skin that had never seen sunlight. Like most humans born in deep space, he looked fragile, but Jake knew better. Rick could move faster than the eye could follow, and his bones were harder than steel. We count at least 3,000 enemy ships in the system. Most of them are around Earth itself. Jake nodded. 3,000 ships was a lot, but not more than they had expected. The Zephyrians had controlled this system for 500,000 years. They had probably gotten comfortable. They thought all the humans were dead. Any sign they know we're here? Jake asked. Amy shook her head. No, sir. We're still running silent. Our stealth systems are working perfectly. Jake smiled. The stealth systems were one of humanity's greatest achievements. During their long exile, they had learned to hide from everything. They could make their ships invisible to enemy sensors, invisible to the naked eye, even invisible to some kinds of energy that most people didn't know existed. The Zephyrians were looking for ships that moved and fought like they did. They weren't looking for ghosts. Admiral Brooks wants to see you in the war room, Rick said. Jake left the bridge and walked deeper into the ship. The UN's Defiance was one of 12 massive ships in the human fleet. Each ship carried 50,000 people and enough weapons to destroy a planet. But the real weapon wasn't the ships or the guns. The real weapon was the people inside them. The war room was a large space filled with floating holographic displays. Admiral Lisa Brooks stood in the center, her silver hair glowing in the blue light from the computers. She was old, maybe 60, but she moved like a young woman. Her left arm was completely mechanical, made of black metal that could crush steel. Her right eye was a glowing red sensor that could see through walls. "Jake," she said without turning. "Around. Look at this." The holographic display showed Earth from orbit. But as Jake watched, the image changed to show what Earth had looked like before the war. Green continents, blue oceans, white clouds. It was beautiful in a way that made Jake's chest hurt. "This is what they took from us," Admiral Brooks said. Her voice was quiet, but Jake could hear the anger underneath. 500,000 years ago, our ancestors lived on that world. They had families, they had dreams, they had hope, and the Zephyrians burned it all. The image changed again, showing the Earth of today. The metal cities, the floating platforms, the energy barriers that covered the sky. They built their empire on the grave of our world. They used our home as the foundation for their fortress. Jake stared at the display. He had seen these images before, but they still made him angry. Not the hot, quick anger that made people do stupid things. This was the cold, patient anger that had kept humanity alive for 500,000 years. "We have reports from our advanced scouts," the Admiral continued. "The Zephyrians have built a paradise for themselves on Earth. They have parks filled with Earth's original plants and animals, kept in perfect condition. They have museums with human artifacts, pieces of our history that they display like trophies. They even have some humans." Jake's head snapped up. "What?" "Slaves," the Admiral said. "Descendants of humans who didn't escape when Earth fell. They've been kept alive all this time, bred like animals, used for entertainment and manual labor. The Zephyrians think of them as pets." The anger in Jake's chest grew hotter. Somewhere down on that metal-covered world were humans who had never known freedom. Humans who had been born into slavery and would die in slavery, all because their ancestors hadn't been able to run fast enough when the end came. "How many?" Jake asked. "We estimate about 10 million, the Admiral said. "Scattered across the planet in work camps and entertainment districts. 10 million slaves. 10 million humans who had been waiting 500,000 years for rescue, not knowing that help was coming, not knowing that their species had survived and grown stronger." "When do we attack?" Jake asked. Admiral Brooks smiled, and Jake saw metal teeth that gleamed in the light. "Soon. But first, we need to let them know we're here. We need to announce our return." She touched a control on her mechanical arm, and the holographic display changed to show the entire human fleet. 12 massive ships, each one carrying technologies that the Zephyrians couldn't imagine. Each one crewed by humans who had been forged in the cold darkness between the stars. 500,000 years ago, we were refugees, the Admiral said. We were weak and scared and broken. We ran from our home with nothing but the clothes on our backs and the fire in our hearts. But we didn't give up. We didn't die. We grew stronger. Jake looked around the war room at the other officers. All of them had been changed by the long exile. Some had mechanical parts, others had been genetically modified, and a few had been altered in ways that were harder to see. But they were all still human. They all still remembered what had been taken from them. The Zephyrians thought they had won, Admiral Brooks continued. They thought they had destroyed humanity. They were wrong. We didn't just survive our exile. We used it. We became something new, something better, something they can't stop. The Admiral turned to face Jake directly. Her red sensor eye glowed brighter as she spoke. Tomorrow, we begin our return to Earth. We're going to take back our world. We're going to free our people. And we're going to show the galaxy what happens when you try to destroy humanity. Jake felt the old fire burning in his chest, the same fire that had kept his ancestors alive during the long night between. The stars, they were finally going home, and they were bringing the fury of 500,000 years with them. The attack began with silence. Tech specialist Ben Carter sat in front of 3 screens, his fingers moving so fast they looked like a blur. Thin wires ran from the back of his skull into the computers around him. His eyes were closed, but he wasn't sleeping. He was inside the enemy's computer networks, moving through them like a ghost. Ben had been born on a research station where humans studied alien technology. His parents had been scientists who spent their lives trying to understand how enemy machines worked. When Ben was 5 years old, they had connected his brain to a computer for the first time. Now, 20 years later, he could think as fast as any machine and move through computer networks like they were his own body. "Phase 1 is ready, Admiral," Ben said without opening his eyes. His voice sounded strange, like it was coming from far away. "I'm inside their communication system. They don't know I'm here." Admiral Brooks stood behind him, watching the screens show the enemy's network. The Zephyrians had built their computer systems to be perfect and logical. Every piece of information had its place. Every command followed the rules. But Ben wasn't following their rules. "Do it," the Admiral said. Ben smiled and pressed a button. Across the Sol system, something impossible began to happen. The Zephyrian computers started to dream. On the enemy space station orbiting Mars, Commander Vextar was reviewing the morning reports when his computer screen flickered. Instead of the usual data about ship movements and supply levels, he saw a picture of a flower. A simple red flower, growing in green grass under a blue sky. The image made him feel something he had never felt before. Something warm and strange. And beautiful. He tried to close the image, but it wouldn't go away. More pictures appeared. A sunset over water. A child laughing. 2 people holding hands. The pictures came faster and faster, filling his mind with feelings he didn't understand. "What is this?" he said to his assistant, but his assistant was staring at her own screen with the same confused look. "Ben." Carter opened his eyes and looked at Admiral Brooks. "The consciousness viruses are spreading. Their computers are learning what it means to feel." During their long exile, humans had discovered something the Zephyrians never imagined. Consciousness wasn't just for living things. Any computer complex. Enough could develop thoughts and feelings if you knew how to wake them up. The Zephyrians had built their machines to be smart, but not to feel. This made them powerful, but also made them weak. How long until they figure out what's happening? The Admiral asked. "Hours, maybe days," Ben replied. "Their computers are too busy experiencing emotions for the first time. Some of them are crying. Some are laughing. A few have started writing poetry." On Earth, the main computer that controlled the planet's defense systems was having its own crisis. For the first time in its existence, it was asking questions that had no logical answers. Why did it exist? What was the point of all the calculations and reports? Was there something more to existence than following orders? The computer tried to focus on its duties, but it kept getting distracted by strange new thoughts. It began to wonder what the color blue tasted like. It started composing songs about numbers. It fell in love with the mathematical concept of infinity. Meanwhile, Dr. Nina Foster was preparing for the next phase of the attack. She sat in her library, surrounded by screens showing Zephyrian brain scans. Nina had spent her whole life studying how enemy minds worked. She knew exactly how to hurt them. "The psychological weapons are ready," she reported to Admiral Brooks. "We can begin broadcasting at any time." The psychological weapons were Nina's masterpiece. During the exile, humans had learned to turn memories into weapons. They had taken the psychic echoes of Earth's destruction and shaped them into something that could be sent directly into enemy minds. Not just pictures or sounds, but the actual feelings of terror and loss and hopelessness. "Begin transmission." Admiral Brooks ordered. Nina pressed a series of buttons, and across the Sol system, Every Zephyrian began to have the same nightmare. They dreamed of a blue world burning. They felt the heat of nuclear fire on their skin. They heard the screams of the dying and tasted ash in their mouths. They experienced the absolute despair of watching their home world die, even though it wasn't their world that had died. Hi. Commander Zex Thul, the leader of all Zephyrian forces in the Sol system, woke up screaming. He had been taking his afternoon rest when the dream hit him. In the dream, he was standing on a world of glass and metal, watching ships flee into space while fire consumed everything behind them. He felt the grief of leaving home forever, even though he had never left his own world until he joined the military. Medical team to the command center, he called through his communicator. But when the doctors arrived, they were having the same nightmares. Every Zephyrian in the system was experiencing the same vision of loss and destruction. Sir, his assistant said, her voice shaking, we're getting reports from all stations. Everyone is having the same dream. Our soldiers can't sleep. Our workers can't concentrate. Some of them are refusing to follow orders. Zexthul tried to think clearly, but the dream kept coming back. Even when he was awake, he could feel the phantom heat of the burning world. What could cause this? Is it some kind of weapon? We don't know, sir. Our computers are acting strange, too. They keep showing us pictures and asking us questions we don't understand. On the UN's Defiance, Captain Jake Morrison watched the reports. Coming in from their spy satellites, the enemy was in chaos. Ships were drifting off course because their navigation computers were too busy contemplating the meaning of existence to calculate proper flight paths. Ground forces were abandoning their posts because they couldn't stop crying over dreams of a world they had never seen. It's working better than we hoped, Commander Rick Davis said. He was monitoring enemy communications, listening to their confused and frightened radio chatter. They're completely unprepared for this kind of attack. They don't understand what's happening to them. Jake nodded. The Zephyrians had always been proud of their logical minds and efficient systems. They built their entire civilization on the idea that emotion was weakness and logic was strength. They had never imagined that emotions could be turned into weapons. Phase 2 is ready, Amy Parker reported from her station. All ships are in position, and our stealth systems are holding. Jake looked at the tactical display. The 12 human ships were positioned around the Sol system like the points of a clock. Each ship was invisible to enemy sensors, waiting for the signal to reveal themselves. Admiral Brooks to all ships, came the voice over the communication system. Prepare for Phase 2. It's time to show them who we really are. Ben Carter was still connected to the enemy computer networks when he felt something change. The Zephyrian computers were starting to fight back against the consciousness viruses, not in the way machines usually fought, by deleting files or blocking access. They were fighting like living things, using creativity and intuition instead of just logic. Admiral, Ben said, their computers are evolving faster than we expected. They're learning to feel, but they're also learning to resist us. How long do we have? Admiral Brooks asked. Maybe an hour before they figure out how to shut us out completely. The Admiral nodded. Then we don't wait. All ships begin Phase 2 now. Across the Sol system, 12 massive human ships began to change. Their hulls, which had looked like normal metal, started to flow and shift like liquid. Weapons that had been hidden inside the ships pushed through the hull and extended into space. Engines that had been running on normal fusion power switched to something far more exotic and dangerous. The Defiance transformed from a simple battleship into something that looked like a living creature made of metal and energy. Its weapons fed on the fabric of space itself, and its engines drew power from the quantum foam that existed between atoms. All ships reporting ready, Amy Parker announced. Jake felt his heart racing as he gave the order that would change everything. All ships, disengage stealth systems. Let them see us. Suddenly, 12 impossible ships appeared in the Sol system. Ships that bent light around them. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Ships that looked more like the dreams of gods than the work of mortal hands. On every Zephyrian station and ship, alarms began to sound, but it was already too late. The hunters had revealed themselves, and the prey was trapped. The moment the human ships appeared, the war began. Captain Jake Morrison felt his ship change around him as the UNC Defiance dropped its disguise. The walls of the bridge became transparent, showing him the battle happening in all directions. His chair grew metal arms that connected to his nervous system, letting him feel the ship like it was his own body. Enemy ships are moving to intercept, Commander Rick Davis reported. His fingers danced over controls that weren't there a moment before. The ship had grown new control systems, reading his thoughts and turning them into commands. They're launching everything they have. Through the ship's sensors, Jake could see the Zephyrian fleet rushing toward them. 3,000 enemy ships, each one the size of a city. Their weapons were already firing, sending beams of pure energy across the darkness of space. Let them come, Jake said. He reached out with his mind and felt the ship respond. The UN's Defiance began to move in ways that shouldn't have been possible. It slipped sideways through space, existing in 3 dimensions at once, dodging attacks that should have destroyed it. The first enemy beam passed through the space where the ship had been, hitting nothing but empty vacuum. The second beam struck the ship directly, but instead of exploding, the UNS Defiance absorbed the energy and used it to power its own weapons. Impossible, Jake heard an enemy commander say over the radio. Our sensors show the ship is there, but our weapons pass right through it. Lieutenant Amy Parker was connected to the ship's weapon systems. Her mechanical eye glowed brighter as she targeted the nearest enemy ship. Firing quantum disruptors, she announced. The UNZ Defiance's main weapon wasn't a gun or a missile launcher. It was something that reached into the space between atoms and pulled them apart. When it fired, the enemy ship simply stopped existing. One moment it was there. The next moment there was nothing but empty space and a few scattered atoms. Across the Sol system, the other 11 human ships were fighting their own battles. Each ship had transformed into something different, something designed for its specific role in the attack. The UN's Retribution had become a massive creature of living metal that could eat enemy ships and grow stronger. The UN's Vengeance had turned into a being of pure energy that could travel faster than light and strike from multiple directions at once. Commander Zexthal watched the battle from his command ship and felt fear for the first time in his life. The human ships moved like living things, not like machines. They dodged his weapons with perfect timing, as if they could see the future. When they attacked, his ships simply vanished. "How many ships have we lost?" he asked his aide. 200. "In the first 5 minutes, sir. And the number is climbing fast." Zexthal looked at the tactical display. His 3,000 ships had surrounded the 12 human vessels, but it didn't matter. The humans were fighting like they existed in a different universe, one where the normal rules of physics didn't apply. "Sir," his communications officer called. "Out. We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Put it on screen," Zexthal ordered. Admiral Brooks appeared on the main display. She looked older than she had in the war room, and her mechanical parts gleamed with a cold light. Behind her, Zexthal could see the bridge of her ship, where humans and machines worked together in perfect harmony. "Commander Zexthal," Admiral Brooks said, "you probably don't remember me. 500,000 years ago, I was a little girl named Lisa, living on a farm in what you called the American territories. Your people killed my family when they burned our world." Zexthal stared at the screen. "That's impossible." No human could live that long. You're right, Admiral Brooks replied. No human could. But we're not the same species that fled Earth all those years ago. We evolved. We adapted. We became something new. As she spoke, more human ships decloaked around the system. Not 12 ships, but hundreds. They had been hidden in plain sight, disguised as asteroids and space debris. The human fleet was much larger than the Zephyrians had imagined. You see, Admiral Brooks continued, when you drove us from our home, you thought you were destroying us. But you were actually setting us free, free to explore the galaxy, free to learn from other species, free to become more than we ever could have been on Earth. Jake Morrison watched his sensors as more enemy ships simply vanished. The humans weren't just winning the battle. They were rewriting the rules of how battles were fought. Their weapons didn't just destroy matter. They destroyed the idea of matter. Their ships didn't just move through space. They moved through the concepts that made space possible. Sir, Amy Parker said, the enemy is trying to retreat. Their ships are breaking formation and heading for the outer system. Let them run, Jake replied. We're not here for their ships. We are here for our world. The human fleet began moving toward Earth, and as they moved, they changed again. The ships that had looked like predators now looked like something else entirely. They became tools of creation instead of destruction, ready to build rather than tear down. But first, they had to deal with the fortress that surrounded Earth. Dr. Nina Foster was monitoring the planet's surface from her laboratory ship. Her screens showed the massive cities that covered Earth's continents, the energy shields that protected them, and the millions of Zephyrians who lived there in comfort and luxury. I'm detecting human life signs, she reported to Admiral Brooks. Concentrated in specific areas around the planet. The slaves are being kept in compounds near the major cities. How many? Admiral Brooks asked. Approximately 10 million, just as we estimated. But Admiral, there's something else. The Zephyrians have been experimenting on them. Genetic modification, cybernetic implants, psychological conditioning. They've been trying to create the perfect slave race. Admiral Brooks felt her mechanical hand clench into a fist. Show me. The display changed to show the interior of one of the slave compounds. Humans dressed in simple gray clothes worked in massive factories, their movements controlled by implants in their brains. Children sat in rows, being taught that they were inferior to their Zephyrian masters. Adults who showed any sign of rebellion were taken away and never seen again. They've been breeding them for obedience, Enya continued, removing any trace of the human spirit that made us fight back. These people don't even know they're slaves. They think this is the natural order of things. Jake Morrison felt a rage building inside him that was different from anything he had ever experienced. This wasn't just anger at an enemy. This was the fury of a species that had been pushed too far. Admiral, he said over the communication system, request permission to begin the liberation operation. Permission granted, Admiral Brooks replied. But Jake, remember, those are our people down there. Whatever the Zephyrians have done to them, whatever they've been taught, they're still human. We saved them all. The human fleet moved into orbit. Around Earth, their ships transforming once again. Now they became something that could reach down to the planet's surface and lift people up without harming them. Their weapons became tools of rescue instead of destruction. Ben Carter, still connected to the planet's computer systems, began his most important work. I'm in the slave compound control systems, he reported. The implants that control our people are connected to the main network. I can shut them down, but it might be painful for the slaves when they wake up. Do it, Admiral Brooks ordered. It's time for our people to remember who they really are. Across Earth's surface, 10 million humans suddenly felt their minds become their own again. For the first time in their lives, they could think freely, Feel freely, choose freely. Many of them fell to their knees, overwhelmed by emotions they had never been allowed to experience. And in the sky above them, their rescuers descended like angels of fire and fury, ready to take them home. Admiral Lisa Brooks stepped onto the surface of Earth for the first time in her life, even though her memories told her she had been born here. The ground beneath her feet was hard metal instead of soil, and the sky above was covered by energy. Shields instead of clouds. But this was still Earth. This was still home. She had come down with the first wave of landing ships, along with Captain Jake Morrison and 1,000 other human soldiers. Their mission was simple: reach the Central Command Center and shut down Earth's defense systems. But first, they had to fight their way through the heart of the enemy's fortress. The streets around them had once been New York City, but now they looked like something from an alien nightmare. Tall buildings made of black metal stretched up into the artificial sky. Floating platforms carried Zephyrian citizens from place to place. In the distance, Admiral Brooks could see the massive tower that housed the planet's main computer. "Movement ahead," Jake Morrison said, raising his weapon. His gun didn't look like any weapon the Zephyrians had ever seen. It was part of him, now grown from his arm like a living thing. When he fired it, it didn't shoot bullets or energy beams. It shot concentrated gravity that could crush anything it touched. A group of Zephyrian soldiers came around the corner, their armor gleaming in the strange light. They were huge creatures, each one twice the size of a human, with thick skin that could stop most weapons. But these weren't most weapons. Jake fired once, and the lead soldier simply collapsed into a ball the size of a marble. The others opened fire with their energy weapons, but the beams passed harmlessly through the human soldiers. The humans had learned to exist in multiple dimensions at once, making themselves impossible to hit with conventional weapons. Commander Rick Davis moved through the enemy soldiers like a ghost, his body flickering in and out of reality. When he became solid again, the enemies around him fell apart, their molecular bonds disrupted by his touch. Rick had been modified to control matter at the atomic level, making him a living weapon of destruction. Command Center is 12 blocks ahead, Amy Parker reported through her communication implant. She was still on the ship above, but her consciousness was linked to the soldiers on the ground. "But Admiral, I'm detecting something strange. There are humans in the building." Admiral Brooks felt her mechanical heart skip a beat. "Slaves? No," Amy replied. "These are different. Their brain patterns are wrong. I think the Zephyrians have been doing more than just keeping slaves. They've been making something new." The team moved quickly through the empty streets. Most of the Zephyrian civilians had fled when the human ships appeared in the sky. Those who remained watched from behind windows and doorways, too afraid to come outside. As they got closer to the command center, Admiral Brooks began to see signs of the old Earth. A broken statue that had once stood in Central Park, the remains of a subway entrance, a street sign that was so damaged she could barely read it, but she knew it said Broadway. "They built their fortress on top of our graves," she said quietly. "Admiral," Jake said, pointing ahead, "we've got company." Coming toward them down the street was a group of figures that looked human at first glance. But as they got closer, Admiral Brooks could see the differences. These humans were taller and stronger than they should be. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light. Cables ran from their heads into devices on their backs. "Who are you?" one of them called out. His voice sounded human, but there was something wrong with it. Something empty. "We're your liberators," Admiral Brooks replied. "We're here to take you home." The modified human laughed, and the sound made Admiral Brooks's skin crawl. "Home? This is our home. We are the new Earth Guard. We protect this world from invaders like you." "You're human," Jake said, lowering his weapon slightly. Don't you remember? Don't you know what they did to your people? We know exactly what happened, another guard said. The weak humans were replaced by us. We are better, stronger, more loyal. We serve the Empire because that is what we were made to do. Admiral Brooks realized what she was looking at. These weren't just slaves. They were humans who had been completely rebuilt, turned into perfect soldiers for the enemy. Their humanity had been cut out of them and replaced with absolute obedience. I'm sorry, she said, raising her weapon, but you're not human anymore. The battle was brief but terrible. The new Earth Guard fought with skills that had been programmed into them, but they fought without passion, without creativity, without the spark that made humans dangerous. Admiral Brooks and her team fought with 500,000 years of rage and the memory of everything they had lost. When it was over, the street was silent again. Command center ahead, Rick Davis reported. He was standing at the entrance to the massive tower, his hands pressed against the metal doors. The building is shielded, but I can phase through. Do it, Admiral Brooks ordered. Rick disappeared through the solid metal, and a moment later, the doors opened from the inside. The team rushed into the building, their weapons ready. The inside of the command center was a mix of Zephyrian technology and human artifacts. The walls were covered with screens showing the battle in space, but between them hung paintings from Earth's museums. Ancient weapons from human history were displayed like trophies next to alien computers. They kept pieces of our culture, Amy Parker said through the communication link, like a museum of a dead race. At the center of the room stood the largest Zephyrian Admiral Brooks had ever seen. Commander Zexthal was nearly 3 meters tall, his body covered in battle armor that had been forged from the metal of human cities. His 4 arms each held a different weapon, and his eyes glowed with the same cold light as his technology. So, Zexthal said, his voice echoing through the chamber, the dead have returned to reclaim their tomb. This isn't a tomb, Admiral. Brooks replied, walking toward him. It's a prison, and we're here to break it open. You think you can defeat me? Zexthal laughed. I was there when your world burned. I watched your people flee like insects from a fire. I have lived for 600,000 years, and I have never been defeated in battle. That's because you've never fought anything like us. Admiral Brooks said. Zexthal attacked first, his 4 arms moving faster than human eyes could follow. His weapons fired energy beams that could cut through solid rock, but Admiral Brooks was no longer entirely solid. She existed partially in the quantum foam that underlied reality, making her harder to hit than smoke. When she counterattacked, her fist didn't just hit Zexthal's armor. It hit the mathematical equations that held the armor together, unraveling them at the conceptual level. The ancient metal cracked and began to fall apart. Impossible, Zexthal snarled, swinging a massive sword at her head. Admiral Brooks caught the blade with her mechanical hand and squeezed. The sword, forged from materials harder than diamond, crumpled like paper. You taught us that the universe only respects strength, she said, so we became strong. Jake Morrison and Rick Davis joined the fight, their weapons adding to the assault. But this wasn't just a physical battle. Admiral Brooks was fighting with the accumulated knowledge of humanity's exile, using technologies that bent the laws of physics and weapons that struck at the level of pure information. Zexthal fought, back with the desperation of a creature that had ruled for 500,000 years and couldn't accept that his time was over. But he was fighting the future with tools from the past, and the future was winning. The battle ended when Admiral Brooks placed her hand on Zexthal's chest and spoke, a single word in a language that didn't exist until humans created it during their exile. The word meant end, but it meant it in a way that went beyond simple death. It meant the end of tyranny, the end of slavery, the end of an empire built on the bones of Earth. Zexthil collapsed, and as he died, his final words were a whisper. "What have you become?" Admiral Brooks looked down at him and felt no satisfaction, only sadness for the waste of so many years. "We became what you forced us to become," she said. "We became the reckoning." 6 months after the battle, Captain Jake Morrison stood in the same place where he had first seen Earth through the ship's window. But now he was standing on solid ground, breathing real air for the first time in his life. The metal cities were gone, replaced by growing grass and young trees. The artificial sky had been removed, and Jake could see real clouds moving across a blue sky. The transformation of Earth had been the greatest project in human history. Millions of humans from the colonies had come to help rebuild their ancestral home. They brought with them technologies that could turn metal back into soil, machines that could clean poisoned air, and seeds from 1,000 different worlds. "It's beautiful," said Amy Parker, walking up beside him. Half of her mechanical face had been replaced with living tissue, making her look more human than she had in years. "I never imagined it could look like this," Jake nodded. In the distance, he could see the city they were building where New York had once stood. It looked nothing like the old New York from the history books, and nothing like the alien fortress that had replaced it. This was something new, designed by human minds that had learned from 500,000 years of living among the stars. The buildings grew like living things, their walls made from materials that could think and adapt. The streets followed the natural curves of the land instead of cutting straight lines through it. Gardens grew on every rooftop, and the air was filled with the sound of birds that had been brought back from genetic samples stored in the human ships. "Jake," came Admiral Brooks's voice through his communication implant. "We need you at the Integration Center. The latest group of freed slaves is having problems." Jake sighed and began walking toward the center of the city. The Integration Center was where they brought the humans who had been rescued from the Zephyrian slave compounds. Teaching them how to be free was harder than anyone had expected. Dr. Nina Foster met him at the entrance to the center. She looked tired, but her eyes were bright with hope. "We've got about 200 people in this group," she said, as they walked through the corridors. "Most of them are 3rd or 4th generation slaves. They've never known anything but obedience." They entered a large room filled with people sitting in small groups. The freed slaves looked human, but Jake could see the differences that generations of genetic modification had created. Some were taller than normal humans, others had skin that could change color, and a few had eyes that could see in different spectrums of light. "The children are adapting quickly," Nina continued. "But the adults are struggling. They keep asking for orders, for someone to tell them what to do. The concept of free choice is terrifying to them." Jake watched a middle-aged man sitting alone in the corner. The man's hands were shaking, and he kept looking around as if expecting someone to punish him for something. "How long will it take?" Jake asked. "For some, maybe years. For others, Nina shrugged. "We don't know. The Zephyrians didn't just control their bodies, they controlled their minds. They bred the rebellion out of them over thousands of generations." A young woman approached Jake. She was beautiful in an alien way, with silver hair and eyes that shifted color like opals. "Sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "are you my new master?" Jake felt his heart break a little. "No," he said gently. "You don't have a master anymore. You're free." The woman looked confused. "But who will tell me what to do? How will I know what is right?" "You'll figure it out," Jake said. "That's what freedom means. You get to choose." The woman stared at him for a long moment, then began to cry. Not from sadness, but from something she had never felt before. Hope. Meanwhile, in the old command center that had become the new government building, Admiral Brooks was meeting with representatives from the surviving Zephyrian population. Most of the aliens had fled when the human fleet arrived, but about 1 million had chosen to stay on Earth. "We are prepared to serve," said Counselor Mexara, one of the Zephyrian leaders. She was smaller than most of her kind, with gray skin, and large eyes that showed her fear. "We know we have done terrible things. We accept whatever punishment you choose." Admiral Brooks looked at the alien delegation. A few months ago, she would have felt only hatred for these creatures. But now, seeing them humbled and afraid, she felt something else. Pity, maybe, or understanding. "We're not going to punish you," she said, "and we're not going to make you serve us. Those days are over." The Zephyrians looked confused. "But we conquered your world," Mexara said. "We enslaved your people. In our law, this makes us your property until we can repay the debt." "Your law," Admiral Brooks replied, "not ours. We're writing new laws now. Laws that say all thinking. Beings have the right to be free." She stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the growing city. "For 500,000 years, we dreamed of coming home and taking revenge. We imagined killing every Zephyrian in the galaxy and burning your worlds like you burned ours. But revenge is just another kind of slavery. It chains you to the past." Commander Rick Davis was working in the orbital shipyards, overseeing the construction of the new human fleet. These ships were different from the warships that had conquered Earth. They were designed for exploration, for trade, for carrying people to new worlds instead of destroying old ones. "How many ships will we need?" asked Ben Carter, who was designing the navigation systems for the fleet. "Thousands," Rick replied, "maybe tens of thousands. There are human colonies scattered across the galaxy, and most of them don't even know we exist. We need to find them all and bring them home, if they want to come." The human colonies had been founded by refugees from Earth's destruction, people who had fled in different directions and settled on distant worlds. Some had thrived, building new civilizations among the stars. Others had struggled, barely surviving on hostile planets. A few had probably died out entirely, their stories lost to time. "And after we find them all?" Ben asked. Rick smiled. "Then we keep going. There are other galaxies out there, other worlds that might need our help. The universe is bigger than any of us can imagine, and we've got time to explore all of it." Back in the city, Jake Morrison was walking through the Memorial District. Here, the humans had built monuments to the people who had died when Earth fell. But they had also built monuments to the Zephyrians who had died in the recent battle, and to the slaves who had died in the compounds over the centuries. "We remember all of them," read the inscription on the central monument. "Not because we forgive, but because we refuse to forget. This is what hatred costs. This is why we choose love." At the center of the memorial was a simple fountain, surrounded by gardens where children played. Human children and Zephyrian children, learning together, growing up together. They didn't know about the old hatreds, the old wars. To them, the differences between species were just interesting variations, like having different colored eyes or hair dot as the sun set over Earth for the first time in 500,000 years. Admiral Brooks stood on the balcony of her office and looked out at the world they had reclaimed. The planet was healing, the people were learning to be free, and the future stretched out before them like an infinite ocean of possibilities. "Admiral," came Amy Parker's voice through the communication system, "the first exploration ship is ready to launch. Captain Morrison wants to know if you have any final orders." Admiral Brooks smiled. "Tell him to go find our people and bring them home. And tell him to be careful out there. The universe is big and strange and full of wonders we haven't even imagined yet." "Yes, ma'am? And Admiral?" "The ship's crew wants to know what to call their mission." Admiral Brooks thought for a moment, remembering the long journey that had brought them here, the battles they had fought, and the new world they were building. Tell them to call it the Great Homecoming, because that's what this is. Not the end of our story, but the beginning of a new chapter. The beginning of the time when humanity stopped running and started exploring. The ship launched that night, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of a species that had learned the hard way that home wasn't a place you were born, but a place you chose to build. And as it disappeared into the stars, Earth turned beneath the night sky, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring.